So this is my review of Fat Dragon Games Ravenfell. If you're not familiar with Fat Dragon Games, this is a modular building system using paper. So you print it out on a colour printer and cut it out, stick it together, and you've got buildings. So as you can see, makes for quite a pretty town. Which is pretty awesome. I mean, I do think it looks fantastic. Obviously, I've accessorised with a few other things here. The trees are from Woodland Scenics. There's a few models in there, and I've got a graveyard in there from, I think that's Grenadier. That's Mythical Dungeons, those four, and the shrine there, and the graveyard is Grenadier, and a few homemade rocks and stuff. But the rest of it is all Ravenfell core set and expansion number 2, because there's about 5 buildings from the expansion. So this is basically what it looks like. Each building collapses down level by level, so you got a top floor, then there's the next floor, and eventually the ground floor. Now, the sales literature talks about the fold flat system. And if I'm honest, I didn't have much luck with the fold flat system. I started building my first house according to the instructions, and it went terribly wrong, and so I just came up with my own method, which was much faster to build and resulted in a stronger house. Unfortunately, it doesn't fold flat. I've basically packed it full of foam core, which is this stuff here, if I can just angle. So that's foam in the middle and a kind of like a plasticky card surface, and I've got that on every level of my building. The buildings themselves are quite light, so they can very easily get knocked around, so be prepared for clumsy players knocking the entire world into a state of earthquake. I could easily see that happening. I mean, the same's true of these trees, of course. In fact, a little side review here of Woodland Scenics trees. They're so fragile and delicate. The instructions said to put them together with something called hobby tack. Never heard of it. It's one of their own products. They're just, trying to sell something else. I used spray mount. Probably not the best thing to use, but it's what I had. It did the trick, but they're just going to fall apart. I mean, the trees are probably fantastic in a model railway use, but not so great, I think, for an RPG use where you're going to reuse things and they're going to get moved around and stuff. But they do look pretty. I quite like how they look. Now, the instructions, I swear, said to use 110 GSM paper, which it's very flimsy. I actually didn't have a colour printer, so I bought one on the basis that I would be printing to 110 GSM paper, and in the end I had to get 120 GSM paper, which is fine, printer could handle that, but I just feel that paper, probably not as good a choice as card, but I understand, if they'd said you've got to use card, there's a lot of printers that wouldn't be able to handle it. So it makes sense that they've designed it for paper. I just wish that when I'd read the instructions beforehand, that it had said, use 110 GSM, but if your printer can handle it, maybe try 200, because I bought a printer that just can't, go up that high. This is printed with a laser printer, so the quality is pretty good. If you were using an inkjet, I don't know how much ink this would be. The way I looked at it, I figured the cost of ink, the fact it doesn't last very long with inkjet printers, it would probably be cheaper to buy a colour laser than to buy a colour inkjet and refills. So, because colour lasers now, they're under £100, they're dirt cheap. So that's the route I took. I did struggle with a few of the edges, so there's a little bit of white showing through here and there, like in this building here. Now, some of that is obviously my building ability, to which I've got a little bit of advice. This is the glue they recommend. Part of the problem with this is it's very hard to control the flow rate, especially as the bottle gets empty, because you have to squeeze really hard and then it can come out quite quickly. And that results in a lot of glue going on the paper, which means it's more likely to get a bit sodden and crumpled up. I tried this, sort of a glue pen thing, and this was really good, except Blue Tack should be ashamed of themselves because there's barely any glue in it. I did half a building, I think, before it ran out. Absolutely useless. I did use a little bit of this stuff, which is, it's a little slow to dry, but it's much more controllable. But most of it I did do with the Scotch adhesive. Do get yourself, if you can build one of these, metal ruler with soft back. That helped a lot. And do get a self-healing mat, so it just, you can score through that all day and cut through that and it won't matter. Overall, it was pretty easy to build, and apart from the fact that I personally had to buy a colour laser printer before I could even build it, it was really cost effective. I think the main set was $18 and the expansion set was $6, so there's nothing really. One of the things, or one of the features of the set is it has what Fat Dragon Games calls dragon layers. So when you look at a building like this one here, for example, I could turn that moss off and have the building without moss. I can change the windows, I can turn the ivy off. That particular one has a snow layer. At first I was going to make it all frozen waste, and then I changed my mind because I liked the leaf pattern more. That's a really cool idea. Marking your squares with leaves. Sure, if you look up close you can see it's a square pattern, right? So, but when you're looking at the overall thing, it just looks like the ground is covered in leaves. It's only when you study it close up that you see that actually it's squares, so that's really cool. This is supposed to be a bell tower. It does have a bell in it. You can't see it because it's right up high, so that wasn't great. But on the whole, this is really fantastic stuff. There's obviously, as you can see from all my buildings, you get a choice of roofs. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic looking piece. I love the fact that all the buildings are explorable, and although I couldn't possibly set them all up with furniture beforehand, for a start, I don't quite have enough furniture for that many buildings. But also, the way I've built them, there's no room inside because all of my pieces have a bottom to them. So there's the foam core right there, so that just sits on top. The way that's meant to be done is there's some tabs, so you slot the tabs into the layer below. To be honest, I just felt that would rip. I am a little bit concerned about storage as to whether they'll break in storage. I've got a place I'm going to keep them in, a cupboard upstairs, and I'm hoping that the next time I use them they'll still be in good condition. We shall have to see on that, because they are quite fragile. Overall, I'm really very impressed with it. I think it's going to make a wonderful centrepiece for my game this weekend. I'm leaving it as a surprise for my players, so I'm not going to upload this video until they've already, walked in and seen it all set up. Compared to doing this with miniatures, sure, miniatures would look better, accept that. But each one of these buildings would be between sort of 40 and 250 odd pounds if I did miniatures, and I'd never be able to paint all of that without going insane. The thing about printing is arguably in the detail, maybe it even looks better than a miniature, but of course you lose it in the surface detail, the fact that it's all flat surfaces. But sprinkled in with a few models, I've got some fences there from some miniatures, shrines, and various little crates and little bits and bobs about, and I think it really brings the whole thing to life. It no longer, it doesn't, once you've got a few miniatures in there, it doesn't look flat anymore. So if you want to build a city for your game, I would highly recommend Fat Dragon Games. I think it's the right tool for the job. I do love doing it with miniatures. There are some fantastic miniature buildings around, but you just cannot get that scale with miniatures unless you're a multi-millionaire with a a team in the Far East to paint it all for you. So yeah, I think it's a good product. I will probably buy some more for future games, because I mean this whole thing only took me 2 days to build. That included painting the graveyard, because I had the models for them a couple of weeks, and the shrine, painted that too, all in those 2 days. Already had the walls, the rock walls, and I had to make the trees, didn't have them. I really only had a couple of these bits beforehand, a handful. All the rest was built in the last 2 days, so that's how quickly you can build something that large with the paper system. So really impressive stuff. Thank you, Fat Dragon Games.